Resourceful Designer, episode 35, When Graphic Designers Feel Overwhelmed.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he's always wanted to write a fantasy novel, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of Resourceful Designer. Before I get into the podcast, I just want to put out a heartfelt thank you for everyone who nominated the podcast for podcast awards. Well, the results are in, and Resourceful Designer is a finalist. I was so excited when the announcement was made on May 22nd. Resourceful Designer is one of the 10 finalists in the arts category for the 11th Annual Podcast Awards. And I couldn't have done that without your help, because it is a People's Choice Awards, and the nomination process goes by the amount of votes that the podcast gets. So thank you to every one of you who nominated Resourceful Designer for the awards. Now, that was just the first step. It's a privilege to be nominated, but it would be amazing to actually win. And I know it's a long shot. I'm up against some really good podcasts in that category. But I'll keep my fingers crossed, and I'm going to put out another call to action for you. Voting for the podcast awards starts Sunday, May 29th, and goes on for 15 days. And you are allowed to place one vote per day per email address you have. Now, for instructions on exactly what you need to do, you can visit resourcefuldesigner.com/podcast awards, where you'll not only find the instructions on how to vote for the podcast, you can also sign up for daily email notices to remind you to vote during the 15 days that the voting process is open. Now, on resourcefuldesigner.com/podcasts, I'll not only have the instructions, I'll also have some other podcasts in other categories that you can add to your vote if you're so inclined. These are all podcasters that I listen to and that I'm friends with, and I'm trying to support their show as well. So if there's a category and you don't know who to vote for, feel free to cast a vote for one of the podcasts that I mentioned on that page. So please, starting Sunday, May 29th, when the voting opens, you can visit podcastawards.com. It only takes a minute. You checkmark the podcast that you're voting for, and then you have to confirm it via an email. And that's all it takes. For complete instructions, as I said, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/podcast awards. And once again, thank you to all of you who helped get Resourceful Designer nominated. I am forever grateful. Now, this is episode 35 of the podcast, so any links, including the previous podcast awards link and any others that I mentioned in this episode, can be found on the show notes page at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 35. Now, I received another 5-star review in iTunes this week, and I love getting these things in. And this one came in from Annie Framit. I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. Just, hi, Mark. I'm from India, working as a graphic designer for the last 6 years, and love your podcasts. Every episode means a lot to me, and I'm looking forward to start my own business in a few months, so it's really helpful for me. Thanks a ton. Well, thank you very much for that. That's my very first review from India. Actually, that's my first review outside of North America. All my previous reviews have come from the US and from Canada. So I am thrilled that Resourceful Designer has expanded around the globe. And I would love to get a review from you, whatever country you're in. Simply visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and I'll take you directly to the podcast on iTunes, where you can just click the ratings and review tab and leave your review for the podcast there. And I love reading them. They mean so much to me, letting me know that I'm not doing this for nothing, that people appreciate the effort I'm putting into this podcast. Now, I also want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's joined me via Google Play Music. As I mentioned a few episodes ago, Resourceful Designer is now available on Google Play. And you could find that by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/GPM. So welcome if you're new to the podcast and you've joined us via Google Play. I really appreciate you being here. And now, as always, before I get into the meat of the episode, I'd like to share my resource of the week. And this week's resource is Google Alerts. Now, you may be thinking, that's not much of a resource. It's just a glorified way of searching the internet. But let me tell you, I use Google Alerts for all sorts of things. Now, if you're not sure what Google Alerts is, it's a way of entering a search term into Google and having the results emailed to you, either on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or as results are discovered, they can automatically be emailed to you. And you could set it up with all sorts of topics. And you do this by visiting alerts.google.com. So as I said, it's just like doing a search engine search, but the results are delivered to your email inbox. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, it's an easy way to keep on top of different trends, different niches, different topics, so that you don't have to constantly be searching for things. You could filter your searches by language, by region, by what sort of sources, whether they come from a news site or whether they come from a blog site or video sites or things like that. And this is a great way to stay on top of things that have to do with your business and with your life, with your hobbies, with your interests, as you may or may not be aware of. I have another podcasting network at solotalkmedia.com where I do podcasts about different TV shows. And I have Google Alerts set up for each one of those TV shows so that anytime something new is published about one of those shows, I get a daily digest email of all the stuff that Google has found for that day. Now, I also have them set up for graphic design and web design and specific applications that I use or that I like or that I want to follow. There's also certain people that I follow in the industry to keep track of what they're up to or who's mentioning them, not to mention myself. I have an alert for Resourceful Designer so that anytime anybody mentions Resourceful Designer, I get an alert for it. So if some blogger out there writes a blog about graphic design podcasts and mentions my podcast, I can easily find out that that's been done. So Google Alerts is a great free resource that saves you the time of having to physically go and search for something. You can control them all through one dashboard. So if you're finished searching for a certain topic, you just turn off that alert. And you can control their frequency. So if you think that you're getting them too often, you can set them up to weekly or daily, or modify the search if you want to go a little bit broader. If you decide that the results just in England are not good enough, maybe you want to search North America or the worldwide. They are just that customizable. So that's my resource of the week this week. It's an easy way to keep track of things without having to put much effort into it. That's Google Alerts, and you can get there by visiting alerts.google.com. And now, when graphic designers are feeling overwhelmed. I decided on this topic after partaking in a conversation in a Facebook group where a graphic designer was talking about how she was feeling overwhelmed. She actually mentioned that she went to a print shop in order to print up a whole bunch of stuff that she needed for the week. And when she was done, she packed everything up and she left, and she actually forgot the printed material that she had gone there to do. And she was saying she just didn't understand how she can leave that stuff behind, considering it was the purpose of the trip to begin with. It all came down to she was just feeling so overwhelmed with everything she had to do that her mind was thinking of too many things, and it just slipped on that one matter, and she left there without her printed material. And she was seeking help in the Facebook group. And I thought this would be a great topic for the podcast because this person is not alone. We all feel it at some time. I've been in this industry for over 25 years, and I still, at times, feel overwhelmed. It's just part of our business. It's part of our lives. It's part of our creativity. There's always stuff to do. I mean, maybe you're feeling overwhelmed because you have too much work to do, which is actually a nice problem to have. It's a lot better than not having enough work to do. Maybe you're feeling overwhelmed because you have too many tight deadlines. Not only do you have a lot of work, but there's deadlines associated with these works that really stresses you out and makes you feel overwhelmed. Or possibly, like I said, maybe you don't have enough work, but you have bills to pay and you keep wondering how you're going to pay these bills. So you feel overwhelmed with these bills and the inability to pay them. Now that's not so good a situation to be in, but that can really make you feel overwhelmed as well. Maybe it's just growing your business. There's so much advice online and in books on how to grow a graphic design business that maybe you're feeling overwhelmed in that state. You're trying so many different things, but you feel like your business isn't growing enough. And that could be a stressful situation as well, especially when combined with having bills to pay and not enough work to pay for them. Maybe it has nothing to do with your business, and it's just you have too much going on in life in general. Maybe your relationships, your friends, your family, your hobbies, your pastimes. You've just got too much going on, and it's hard to juggle everything. And with all of this, it just adds up. It keeps building. And before you know it, the weight of all this stuff that's happening in your life just overwhelms you. Now, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we as graphic designers, as creative people, are affected by this much more than others. I mean, by the nature of our careers, we take our work home with us. There is really no downtime as a graphic designer. You can be out for dinner with friends or sitting down in the evening watching a movie, and without even realizing it, You're thinking of that job you have to work on or that deadline that's coming up, or how are you going to design that logo, or what are you going to do for that website? It's just part of what we do. We can't shut it off. Even when I worked at the print shop, and that was a 9 to 5 job, we closed the place at 5 o'clock. Even then, I couldn't go home and just forget about everything. I would still be thinking about the project I had to work on the next day or what deadlines I had coming up. Sometimes I really envy people that are not in the creative business. When I go into town and I see the bus driver or the janitor at the mall or the bank teller that's serving me, and I think to myself, these people at the end of the day can just forget about their job, go home and enjoy their life. It's not like the bus driver is sitting at home watching TV at night, but his mind is going over, well, maybe I'll try to take that certain corner at a different angle next time, or maybe on this one stop, I'll try to get closer to the curb tomorrow. No, I'm sure they don't think of that. Neither does the bank teller think of, gee, I wonder what sort of deposits or withdrawals I'm going to have to handle tomorrow. No, at 5 o'clock or whatever time their shift ends, they go home and they don't think about their work until their next shift starts. And I admit, sometimes I envy them that, but I also wouldn't give up what I do for anything. I love being a graphic designer. I love working from home and the freedom that it gives me. But that decision means that I and you are more predispositioned to feeling overwhelmed. So, what do you do when that feeling does overtake you? Well, like so many other things in life, it all comes down to baby steps. If you're feeling overwhelmed and you try to tackle absolutely everything, you're not going to get anywhere at all. You have to take baby steps, which means trying to clear your head and taking things one at a time. And sometimes that comes down to just picking one task and working on it. Think about it. Let's just concentrate on the graphic design. Let's forget about all the other stuff happening in your life with your family and your friends and other relationships and your hobbies and your pastimes and just relaxing, sitting down, watching TV and all that stuff. Let's just concentrate on graphic design. Let's say you sit down in the morning and you have 12 things that you need to work on that day. 12 different jobs or 12 different tasks. Maybe they're not all client work. Maybe some of it has to do with your billing or your income tax or whatever. But let's say you have 12 things to do and you make yourself a list. Now, throughout the day, you spend a little bit of time eating away at each of these tasks. So maybe you'll work a little bit on that brochure. You'll do a little work on that logo. Maybe you'll spend some time in your billing, spend some other time organizing your taxes, maybe some other time watching some online course or something in order to better yourself. So you spend a little bit of time on all of these tasks. Well, that's great. You're making progress. But at the end of the day, when you decide to get up from your chair, step away from your computer, you'll still have 12 things that need to be finished. And when you sit down the next day, it'll seem like you didn't get anywhere. Those 12 tasks are still there. But if you decide to just pick one task at a time and work on it all the way through, there's a good possibility that at the end of the day, you only have maybe 7 or 8 things still left to be finished. If you're lucky, a lot less than that. And then you'll feel a lot better. If you don't do that, if you just work on a little bit all the time, you're going to feel overwhelmed because you come back the next day and it feels like you're still working on all the same stuff. You're overwhelmed. It isn't getting anywhere. You're not making any progress. You are making progress. It's just a lot harder to see. When you see a list of 12 things and at the end of the day, you can scratch 4, 5, 6 of them off, it looks like you're making progress and it'll make you feel better. It'll make you feel like you accomplished something and you won't feel as overwhelmed. In the long run, it probably takes you roughly the same amount of time if you worked a little bit on all 12 things or if you picked 1 or 2 and worked on them. In the long run, it probably takes the exact same amount of time or very similar, but you'll feel much better and feel like you're making the progress. And don't feel guilty if there's things on your list that you put down to accomplish today and they don't get done. I know my wife is terrible at this. She'll write a list of all the stuff we have to do in a day, and I'll look at that list and I'll know there's no way we're getting to all of them. And we'll work on that to-do list and scratch off a bunch of items. But at the end of the day, my wife will look and go, oh, we didn't do this and we didn't do that, instead of looking at all the stuff we did accomplish. And that's the way you have to look at it, is what did you accomplish? And don't worry about the stuff that you didn't. I mean, as long as you didn't miss a deadline, it's not a big deal. If you told a client that you were going to work on their brochure on a certain day and you don't get around to working on that brochure, you only work on it the next day, that is not a big deal. I mean, unless you told the client that you would have a proof for them by the end of the day and you didn't deliver, It doesn't really matter if you worked on it Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, as long as you get the proof to them on time. So you work on them one at a time, scratch them off, and whatever's left over goes to the top of your list the following day. So as I said, it's part of our business is we will end up at times feeling overwhelmed. But how can you try to prevent this from happening over and over? How can you prevent being overwhelmed? Well, it's very simple to say, but organization is key. And the easiest way to do that is to make lists. Now, there are a lot of great apps out there to help you organize tasks and to-do lists. I know there's one called Clear, there's Daylight by Market Circle, even something like Evernote. These are all apps that can help you organize your day, your week, and just help you keep on top of things. But I'll tell you, I tried these apps and I don't like them for this task. I prefer have just a simple sheet of paper where I can write a list and scratch it off as things end. I just find when you have an app or some sort of program on your computer which is a to-do list or that, sure, you can check mark the items after they're done, but I just don't get the same satisfaction as taking my pencil and actually physically scratching something off a list. That makes me feel like the task is complete. Now, I know that's just me and maybe it's a little silly, but I like doing that. And I like throughout the day looking down at my list of tasks that I had to do and seeing everything that I scratched off. See, the problem with most of these apps is once you check mark them saying they're done, they try to make it very easy for you so those items disappear from the list. So all you ever see is a list of things you need to do. You don't actually see the progress that you've made unless you turn on some feature or view the tasks that are completed. But most people don't bother doing that. So I always found that whenever I was using one of these apps on my phone or my iPad or on my computer, all I ever saw was stuff I still needed to do, which yes is helpful, but sometimes you need to see what you have accomplished. So that's why I like a piece of paper where every morning I'll write down everything I want to do that day. And as things come up, say a phone call arrives, or I think of something, or I get an email, I'll add something down to that list. And even if it's something I'm going to do right away, like say a client sends me an email and says something, Mark, I noticed a spelling mistake on my website. Can you fix this? And I'm thinking, yeah, I can add this to my list to do it later, but you know what? That's going to take me less than 2 minutes to do. Why don't I just do it right away? So I go onto the website, I fix the spelling mistake, then I email my client back within minutes of them sending it to me saying I fixed the correction. First of all, my client is thrilled that within just a couple of minutes, their website's already been updated and they think, wow, this guy's great to work with. So that's a bonus. But I also make a point of writing that down on my list. Even though I've already done it, I'll write down correct spelling mistake on such and such a website, and then I'll scratch it off right away so that I know it's a task that came up that day and I accomplished it. And at the end of the day, I'll look at my list and I'll say, okay, well, I had all these items to do and this was done, this was done, this was done, and this was done. And sometimes it's just simply send a proof or work on this. Sometimes it's not complete. Sometimes on my list, it'll just say, work on this job, work on this website. And if I did work on that website, it doesn't matter how much I worked on the website. As long as I did work on the website, I'll scratch that off at the end of the day. I did that. I accomplished that task. I worked on that website. And then the next morning, I take that sheet of paper, I tear it off the pad, and I take everything that wasn't scratched off and I write it onto a blank, fresh sheet of paper. And I start again. And as I said, this makes me feel good because I can physically scratch these things off. It's very satisfying to me. And I love tearing that sheet of paper off, looking at everything that I've done, and then throwing that sheet of paper in the recycling bin, and I'm starting fresh the next day. Now, another thing that you can do to help the prevention is to plan your day the evening before. I'll often do that before going to bed. I'll come into my office, I'll sit down for a few minutes, and I'll look at what I need to do the next day. And oftentimes, that sheet of paper that I keep on my desk at all times, or that pad where I have my to-do list, I have several pads for different things. I have one pad for notes that I have to take throughout the day from phone calls and all that. I have another pad that I just use for scribbling things down. Like say I need to get the CMYK colors for a certain color. Well, I'll quickly write them down on this sheet of paper as I'm going from one program to the other or whatever. And then when I'm done with that, I'll just scratch them off or throw that sheet out whenever I'm done. But my to-do list, I'll have that pad in a separate pad. And sometimes at the end of the day, before going to bed, I'll come into my office, I'll look at that pad, and I'll rewrite it at that point. I'll rewrite my next day's tasks on there, adding anything I could think of, anything that came in via email or some project or whatever that I decide I want to work on. And sometimes it might not be work related, Maybe I'll add to my list that I have to go deposit some money at the bank, or I have to go visit somebody or go see a client. I'll write all this stuff down on my list. And then I know. And what's good about this is by planning it the night before, as I go to bed and I'm lying there in the dark, I can start thinking about some of the stuff and organizing my day for the next day in my head. And I'll think to myself, okay, I'm going to start off in the morning. First thing I'm going to do is I'll work on this, and then I'll work on that. And then I'm going to take a break and I'm going to run over to the bank, and then I'm going to stop by this client. Then I'll come back, and that should give me enough time to do this, this, and this. And that way it prevents me having to sit down in the morning and trying to figure this stuff out at that time. I can just come down. I already know what I want to do. I'll sit down at my computer. I'll look at my list to make sure there was nothing I forgot of, or that I didn't think of the night before, or that I hadn't thought of while I was falling asleep. And I'll say, no, there's nothing, or maybe I'll add this, and then I'll get right to work. I don't have to spend time organizing my day because I've already done it the night before. So I find that helps me from getting overwhelmed most of the time, is just keeping this list. Now, the other thing that helps is give yourself longer deadlines. Just last episode, in episode 34, resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 34, I talked about dealing with deadlines and what type of designer are you? Well, when dealing with deadlines, I did mention that sometimes you assign deadlines yourself. You will tell a client, yeah, okay, I'm going to start working on that. I'll give you a proof by Friday, or I'll give you a proof by the end of the day tomorrow. Well, start giving yourself longer deadlines. First of all, unless there's a very set deadline that the client needs something, I will never commit to a certain deadline to get them a proof. I will tell a client, I'll try to get you a proof by the end of the day tomorrow. But I will never tell them that I will get them a proof, because there's always that possibility that maybe their job isn't as important as something else, and I might push it to the bottom of my list. So give yourself longer deadlines. Even if you think you can get your client a proof by the end of the day tomorrow, tell them you'll get it to them in 2 days, or by the end of the week, or the beginning of next week. If you get it to them sooner, they're going to be thrilled. And once again, they're going to say, hey, this person's really great to work with. Look at that. They told me they'd have it by the end of the week, and yet I get it on Wednesday. I'm going to recommend them to everybody. So it's a win-win in that way. And yet if you don't get it to them on Wednesday, you only get it to them on Friday, they're going to think, well, he told me he'd get it to me by the end of the week, and here it is. So give yourself extra days. Give yourself a longer deadline than what you actually need, if you're capable of. I know sometimes you can't. There might be an actual deadline that the client needs things by, and really there's nothing you can do about that. But in the cases where you don't have those set in stone deadlines, give yourself a little bit longer time to help you organize and work on it along with everything else you have to do. And if by doing this, you won't feel as overwhelmed. Now, another thing you can do to help prevent it is find someone to help you. I know sometimes being a graphic designer is a very solo endeavor. I mean, I'm a graphic designer. I can't have somebody else designing the stuff for me. My clients are coming to me. I'm not an agency where they hire the agency and not necessarily know who's actually designing the work. But there's some tasks, some menial things or repetitive work that you can find somebody for. I was hired to do stationery for a large corporation. This is maybe 2 years ago. And when I designed the new business cards, they gave me an Excel spreadsheet of probably 700 plus people. This was an international corporation, and they were getting new business cards for everybody. So they gave me this Excel sheet, which, as I said, over 700 names, email addresses, phone numbers, cell numbers, and that for all their staff. Now, yeah, I could have taken the time. I had already designed the business card, and I could have taken the time to insert those names on those business cards for every single person. But it wasn't something I wanted to do, and it wasn't something I needed to do. I didn't need to spend all my time doing that. So I found somebody. In that case, I contacted a local design college, and I hired one of the students that was willing to do it. It was a very menial task, and it didn't help their portfolio or anything, but it did give them something that they could put on their resume that they actually worked, did some freelance for my business, and they didn't have to actually say what they were doing. They were just working on the stationery, and I actually gave them permission to name the client they had done the work for. So if I would have had to do that myself, I may have felt overwhelmed with all the other work I had to do. But because I was able to find somebody to take on the job got done, the client was happy, and I was able to devote time to the other stuff on my list that needed to get done. So sometimes that's all it takes, is to find someone to do the menial tasks. Maybe it doesn't have to do with design. Maybe you have clients that you're going after for money or something like that. Maybe you could hire somebody to stay on top of them and to send them notices and payment reminders. And you take that off your plate. Let somebody else handle it. And sometimes when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's not about your work. It's not about your jobs or how much you do. Sometimes it's just you. Sometimes you just need to take some time for yourself. Do something for yourself. Go out and do a walk. Exercise. Exercise is great. It gets your blood flowing, a little bit of adrenaline, helps your creativity and all that. And when you come back, you usually feel a little gung-ho and want to get to work instead of that drab, I've got so much to work on. So do that sort of stuff. Maybe if that's not your thing, just get out, go shopping, go visit a museum, or be creative. If you're somebody who likes to paint, take some time away, go stand by your easel and paint something. Deflate, help decompress. And sometimes that'll help alleviate the feeling of being overwhelmed. Yeah, it's hard to say when you have all these deadlines and all this work to do, but trust me, you do need to take some time for yourself. Because if you don't, this whole feeling of being overwhelmed could actually escalate into some sort of breakdown, which I have seen happen. So do take some time from yourself, even if it's just stepping away from your desk, going to wash the dishes, going for a walk. Even just go stand and stare out the window for 5-10 minutes before returning to your desk. It will help. Another thing you could do is clean your desk. Some people, the clutter, having stuff all over their desk could help escalate that whole feeling of being overwhelmed. But if they have a clean desk, they feel more at ease and they're able to work better. So maybe that's all it takes. Maybe if you have too much stuff on your desk, clean some stuff off. And in a clean environment, you might feel better. I'm one to talk. I look around my desk and I can barely see the surface of my desk. I've got so much stuff on it, but that's me. It doesn't bother me. Yes, I love having a clean desk, but having a messy desk doesn't add to that feeling of being overwhelmed for me, at least. But to some it might. So try cleaning your desk and see if that helps. All of this to say that we are graphic designers. We are creative people. We are going to feel overwhelmed with everything we have to do. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have the type of job where you can just turn it off at 5 o'clock. I know I have a policy that I work from 9 to 5. I used to work all sorts of hours, but I've stopped doing that. I work from 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, I step away. Sometimes in the evenings, I might get back to a little bit of work, but it's rare these days. I usually at 5 o'clock, as I said, I'm done. But that's just physically. I'm not in front of my computer. My mind never shuts off, and I'm always working on things. And that's just the nature of what type of people we are. We're creative people. If I'm not thinking of graphics or client work, my mind is thinking of something else creatively. What sort of renovations can I do on the house? Is there some creative yard work I can do? I think of different ideas for the great novel that one day I may sit down and write. So the mind never stops working. And sometimes it just happens. You feel overwhelmed. It's human nature. And we're just more predisposed to it than some other people. But also know that because we are creative people, we have a better ability of making our way through, getting over it, focusing, and getting back to work. And just know that whenever you do go through these periods where you feel overwhelmed and you make it through to the other side, you're going to come out a better person, a better designer, just from the experience. And that experience will help you the next time you're feeling overwhelmed. So trust me, you're not in this alone. So that was all I wanted to talk about on that subject. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Please leave me a comment on the show notes page at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 35. I'd love to know your comments on this. Now, before I sign off, I've got my question of the week. And this one comes in from Haya. She says, "Hi, I designed for a while in the company I work. I took some classes in the beginning, but I'm mostly self-taught. I find that I'm missing some basic rules in design that make my work kind of amateurish. I really would like to take design to the next level, but the tutorials and content that I find on the internet are more about how to use Photoshop or any program and less about concept and design. I cannot go back to school of design, so I would love to hear your input on where I can learn more on my free time." Well, thanks for that question, Haya. Now, these days is a wonderful time. Back in my time, back in the early 90s when I went to school, that was the only way you'd learn graphic design. You had to go to school for it. But these days, it's amazing. There are some really, really good designers out there that actually never went to school. Now, because of my background and the era I come from, I do believe you do need that experience from school. It'll make you a better designer. But if you don't have it, there are many ways you can learn. And a lot of it is just by trial and error. Now, you say there's not a lot of good things online, but there are a few places that offer some really good classes about graphic design, not necessarily how to use the programs or how to do this in Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign, but actual graphic design stuff. Lynda.com is one of them. And they have courses like Introduction to Graphic Design, Getting Started in Graphic Design, The Foundations of Graphic Design History, Insights on Graphic Design. They have tons of courses. And Lynda, if you visit resourcefuldesigner.com/Lynda, and that's Lynda with a Y, you can sign up for a 10-day free trial. And during that 10-day trial, you can look at all of their courses, as many as you want. You get full access to them. So give that a try. You got 10 days and have a look at some of these courses to see if they are classes that you would like. And these are not just whimsy courses. These are courses put on by professionals, professionally edited, professionally produced, and the content is done by professionals. So you're getting really good stuff. Now, another place you can get great courses is Creative Live, which you can get to by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/creativelive. And they have some great courses that you can buy one at a time. Again, lots of graphic design related courses, Introduction and Graphic Design 101 or logo creation or brochure creation. Lots of really good stuff. And these are paid courses, but you buy them one at a time. If you want the logo course, you pay for it. And if you want the other course, you pay for it. And all the courses are different prices depending on what's involved. And some of them might be a 2-hour course and some of them might be a 10-hour or 20-hour course. So there's some great stuff there. And don't forget Udemy. And you can get there from resourcefuldesigner.com/Udemy. And they offer some great courses there. Now, those ones are not as well produced, in my opinion, as Creative Live and especially as Lynda. But Udemy actually has some free courses you can find on graphic design and some other ones that are very inexpensive. And the thing with Udemy is they often have sales where you can get courses at ridiculously low prices. So those are 3 places I would start. And yes, what I did share with you are affiliate links. I am affiliated with all 3 of these places because I believe in what they do and I think they do really good stuff. So by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/either Lynda, and that's Lynda with a Y, /creativelive or /Udemy, and that's UDEMY, those will redirect you to the individual sites. But if you do sign up, I do get a small commission. So I just want to put that out there that I do get a commission. But the reason I'm sharing these is because I'm familiar with them and I do believe they would help you. I've taken many courses. Lynda.com is the way I learned web design. I learned CSS, I learned PHP, I learned MySQL and some HTML. Lynda.com is how I got into web design. If it wasn't for them, I might not be a web designer right now. So I can tell you that they have some really good courses. I've taken many courses on Udemy that I really enjoyed. Now, there has been some courses on Udemy that I didn't like or that I didn't finish because I didn't think they were well done, but there has been some really good ones. Same with Creative Live. I've only seen a few courses. I haven't actually taken any of them, but I have seen courses that other people have gotten and I've looked at them and they're very well done. So there may be some other options for you out there, but I don't want to recommend them because I personally don't have any experience with them. But I do have experience with these 3, and that's why I became affiliates with them. Because as I said, since I started this podcast, any resources I share with you, I will only share stuff that I am familiar with and that I am willing to pass on to you. And that's why I'm not sharing any of the others. But other options you have, if you don't want to pay for some of these courses, and as I mentioned, Udemy does have some free classes, so there's no harm in checking them out. But other things you can do is just visit websites for inspiration. Look at how things are done. You can also join. There's some great Facebook groups out there where you can post your work. And even if you are just a beginner or you still think your stuff is amateurish, you can post it in there and ask for tips, ask for critiques, and let them know that you're learning and you want their advice. Now, you have to have a pretty thick skin if you're going to do this on Facebook because some people will completely bash your idea and you just have to ignore those. Because some of those people are just trolls out there and they'll give you some really bad advice or just not even some critique. They'll just come out and really badmouth your design. So ignore those people and listen to those who actually do give you some creative advice. And some of them are really good. Some of them are really talented designers that are willing to help you. And a lot of people, that's what they do is just they show their work. Even if it is client work, you can show something and say, here's something I just did for a client. How would you have improved this? Or how can I have done better? And it's not necessarily that you have to do it, but you do learn for the next time. So the next time you do a brochure or a logo or whatever, you can soak in that insight that you're getting and you can apply it the next time around. And every job you do, you become better. It's just like anything. It's just like sports. It's just like music. The more you practice, the better you get. So the more you design, the better you get. So just keep at it, Haya. I mean, even though I went to school, I know when I came out of school and I graduated and I started designing, if I look back now at the stuff I did the first couple of years out of college, it was some pretty bad stuff. At the time, I thought it was great. I was a fantastic designer. But now looking back, I see all sorts of stuff that I could have done better. And that's just the nature of anything creative. So just stick with it, and I'm sure you will get better. So thank you very much for your question, Haya. I really do appreciate it. Now, if you would like to send in your question for a future episode of the podcast, I'm starting to run low. I had a whole bunch of questions, but now I'm starting to run low again. Please visit my feedback form on the website at resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and send me your question. So that's it for this episode. Next week's episode will be all about spring cleaning. It's that time of year, and I'll go over some stuff that graphic designers may want to do. Now, I also want to remind you of this week's resource of the week, which was Google Alerts that you can get to by visiting alerts.google.com and try it out. Set up some alerts for you and see if it's something that you can get into. I love getting my daily alerts. And also, once again, thank you if you did help nominate Resourceful Designer for an International Podcast Award. And even if you weren't one of the ones to help get the podcast nominated, you can help in the voting. Starting Sunday, May 29th for 15 days, the voting opens and you can vote once per day per email address that you have. So hint, hint, if you have more than one email address, you can vote using each one of them. Now, for full instructions on what to do and to sign up for a daily email notification reminding you to vote, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/podcast awards. Well, that's it for me this week. I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best in your graphic design business, and as always, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.